Hello modeling friends, I'm Lucas and you are watching coldemonspl. Today we are going to do the last things for our model, which as you may remember got the weathering a week ago. If you haven't watched the previous parts, I invite you to check what I have achieved and what methods I have used. Of course, to be notified about the news on this channel, you know what to do. Okay, that's where we finished in the previous episode, and today we are going to make some detailing. Ta-da! 4 horsemen, tankmen of the apocalypse. This figure is a resin Panzer art product with some minor modifications. The commander is plastic from Master Box but with a resin head and boots from the first figure. The third crew member is a guy from Stalingrad miniatures. And the driver is also from Master Box. I added the resin head and a little surgery to make it easier to fit. Some trick and the figures are painted. Right at the beginning I glued the driver to the correct place. The slow drying glue was essential as it was hard to set the figure in the perfect position at once. The simple tissue paper is perfect material for tarps. Just cut them to the correct size and separate the layers. 2 are more than enough. Now dilute some PVA glue with tap water and mix it with the color you want on your tarp. Next, soak the paper with the color and dry it. I always use a hair dryer because it makes my work much faster. The material shouldn't be completely dry, but it also shouldn't get our fingers dirty. Then you can start molding it to the shape you need. While doing this, I always try to make it look as natural as possible and wonder how the crew would do it in the field. All imperfections can be done at this stage. If someone wants, then adding some extra details like strings, metal eyelets, seams and more, I suggest doing after it's completely dry, when the paper is already harder and easier to work with. From time to time you can moisten the tarp with water mixed with glue to make the arranging easier and to stick it to the surface. I always try to add some human factors. Here the easiest and quite obvious one was to put the captured submachine gun with spare magazines. It could be a defense weapon in the situation of unexpected attack during the march, or when the infantry wouldn't be able to keep up the pace or would already be dead. Okay, now we have tarps ready and we can take care of the shading. To make highlights and shadows I used 2 colors, light and dark grey. They were enough to add a 3D effect. The painting itself wasn't a big challenge, we need to remember to make it look natural. It's easy to paint the paper when it's completely dry, and as you can see the folds look very realistic. All because the paper was quite thin and easy to arrange. Of course, this is one of several ways to make cool looking tarps, and I hope to show some more tricks in the future. Now I could add the first crew member. His positioning was crucial for the other 2 figures. A drop of super glue to get a good position, and then I added a little bit more to the invisible places inside the turret. The commander is leaning on with his left leg, so when I was sure that the glue was dry I started to set him up. The third figure was the easiest task. Now it turned out that somehow a small crevice was created under the commander's ass. Such a mistake is easy to fix. Just make a small blanket that could be used as a bit of luxury during field operations. I prepared everything exactly as before, with the difference that it was painted in a slightly more sophisticated pattern. I didn't care too much about its straight lines because they won't be visible after folding. Now I took Dragon's 2nd generation frame because the MP40 which I used earlier to arrange the tarp was some waste. The detailing is really good and the only thing added was a belt. To raise the realism level I added a spare magazines, and it's very possible that such a weapon would have a chance to slide off the turret while riding, but I leave it to the theoretical deliberations. The pigment was useful to do some weathering on the tarps. A small amount may change the appearance a lot and you have to be careful because it's easy to overdo. Do you remember the models I showed in the previous episode? One of them, more precisely a demon from Croatia, had birch beams. It looks great to me, especially as it contrasts with the dark color of the vehicle. Now I have the opportunity to show how a realistic beam can be made from handy materials and even from waste. As you noticed, I cut the old brush handle to the correct length. I wrapped the copper wire that the model manufacturers add to the sets around the pin and stuck it stiffly. Now I wrapped everything in paper and soaked with PVA glue. If you want to ask about the color, there was some remnant of paint in the container, so that's why it looks like this. I cut off the excess of paper, soaked more with glue and dried it with warm air. How to make a bark? It's very simple. The Easy Cast solution is perfect for this, and as you can see, the surface easily resembles a real tree. Now it was possible to start the painting. This color was perfect for my beam. We all know that the birch is generally a fairly light tree, but its base color is dark green or even grey. It all depends on the angle from which we look at them. For white bark, ivory paint fits perfectly. In order to make the right surface with the base color visible, it's best to paint it in an inaccurate but controlled manner. I think what you see shows better how it's supposed to look and what I'm talking about. On the other hand, the structure I made using the Easy Cast solution is very helpful. Some corrections with the base color, and additionally we can apply pure white to add some highlights. The bark is almost ready. Only thin lines with the base color are left to paint. Both ends should be finished flat. I previously glued the tips with super glue and sanded them after it dried. Now I took the wood base to paint them. I checked on the internet whether the birch trees have visible trunk rings. It turned out that not. I just added the dark edges of the bark and made a fine wash on the ends. It's time to finish the spare tracks. My plan is to paint and weather them as if they were from some destroyed vehicle. Therefore, right after applying the base color, I started adding the dry matte. Just like before, the Kursk earth has been additionally enriched with the pigments. I wrapped the whole thing gently with a cotton bud. After polishing, I applied some oil paint rust, but very gently. The exaggeration in this case would ruin the whole effect. We go back to the beam. Now it must be attached to the vehicle. The thin wires that I have wrapped around the handles and the beam will be the best for this purpose. In my opinion, such prosaic elements as wire or string should have the appropriate thickness. Nothing spoils the overall appearance more than thick rope or wire used to tie a stowage down. The old electric motors are a good source of obtaining such a wire. They can also be pulled out of the electric cables. Later is enough to heat them in a fire to make more flexible. The additional tarp will undoubtedly add more realism to our model. Just see how I worked on it. In the open box series I mentioned that I have some imperfections on the motor levers. Now they had to be covered, and the best thing for that was a little rag. The method is the same as before, only the color is slightly different. When the tarp on the beam was already dry, I took care of painting it properly. I am talking about shadows and highlights, of course. Additionally, I added an axe to slightly break the colors. There are also some small artifacts on the right side, all to make the model look even more interesting and natural. Okay, now something for the back of the vehicle. What you can see is a standard chain from RB model previously soaked in liquid for metal blackening and wrapped slightly with a rusty pigment. I have prepared the section of 1 meter and cut it off if necessary, piece by piece, adapting it to a specific model. So here was enough to lightly polish it with a metallic pigment, and then the chain was ready to be placed on the model. The best place was the back plate. There are hooks on which this element can be attached nicely. Finally, a little dust to unify it with the vehicle. The dust was also applied to the bottom of the beam where it would accumulate while riding. And I can say it's done. Time for a drink and to see the model from a distance. The question is, what do we need to build a small stand for our model? I would say not much. A piece of cardboard, balsa planks, letters for the title, a metal set square, a sharp hobby knife and super glue. First I cut the walls. In this case I didn't need exact lines, so I used a free hand to cut them open. These small points were used to guide the knife relatively straight. The edges were sanded a bit, and the next step was to trim the cardboard to make the floor of our base. Now all the boards must be glued together, but it's necessary to keep the right angles. After a few minutes the frame was done. As you can see, there are also the brackets both on the walls and the floor. It's better to have them because then the structure is 100% stable. Minor differences in the point where both boards meet together can be easily removed with a sharp knife. A bit of sanding of course, and we can move on to the next stage. This strange structure inside are the supports under the display area. I made them from the remains, so they aren't visually perfect, but they will certainly fulfill the task. On the top I can now attach another piece of cardboard, but because I ran out of the material a bit, so I matched the leftovers and sealed the joint with masking tape. Now 2 minutes to complete smoothing of the side walls with sanding pad. Then I glued soft pads on the bottom to protect the surface and easily move the whole thing. Okay, now we can start building the terrain. This product is ideally suited for this purpose. It's easy to apply, dries quickly, and most importantly is ready to use all the time. When it gets a little dry, we can boldly imprint the traces of the wheels in it, just like here where we used a simple tool with metal tracks to prepare the traces that the tank leaves on the path of its passage. It's time to work on additional landscape elements. We can cut boards from thin plywood or veneer, which will be great for building an old damaged fence. I cut the brackets out of toothpicks and glued with each horizontal board. The PVA glue was the best because I had time to set up each piece. Thanks to the fact that I used different lengths and finishes of the planks, the whole thing is very atmospheric and stylish. I set various sizes of stones onto the almost dry ground and then glued them with a fixer. It took a while for the glue to dry and I played a bit with acrylics on both wooden elements. The pole and the fence were also treated with AK chemistry and more precisely with dark green enamel to create a little rotten wood effect. Here's some extra detailing to the individual fence boards. Namely, on each of them there is a nail. Let's say a nail, and the rusty speck that usually remains after many years. As you can see, it was easy to make, the same as painting, a few minutes and the effect is great. As you probably noticed, the whole ground has already been covered with the primer, and now we are going to apply gardener and glue on ready-made patches of AK grass. They are ready to use. Well, almost ready to use because we will paint them later. But before the grass painting, we need to make some colors on the soil. Of course I used the same products that were applied to the model, because the color combination of all elements is basic. In addition, I also planted a small tree. Maybe it's not seen well, but I think it fits perfectly here and complements the scene. The link to the tree producer is in description, and I'm sure many of you know his awesome works. After soil-based painting, I focused for a moment on the grass. First I applied the base color, which was Tamiya flat green, and then with an addition of yellow I added a lightening to all the clumps. The effect is great and I think it's much better than unpainted grass. I diluted Summer Kursk earth a lot with white spirit and started to apply it all over the soil. I carefully traced the clumps of grass, and when it was done, I speeded up the drying with a hairdryer. After that I was able to paint stones. As you can see, they are quite contrasting to the soil. Now I could glue the fence into the holes drilled earlier and set up the pole with ready-made road signs which come from Paper Plus model set. To tone down the colored stones, I covered the whole surface with the pigment used for weathering on the vehicle. Then I poured white spirit all over it. Once it dried up, I started to remove the masking tape. In some places I had to use the hobby knife to cut it straight with the edge of the balsa. And this is how it looks like a step before the end. I painted all the walls black with a few drops of satin varnish. I put 3 layers on all sides. Here you can see the effect after first layer. It did the job completely and the boards are black the way I like. Now I have completed the title of the work using laser cut letters from yen models. I gently sanded them and prepared the place of final location. The masking tape helped to glue the letters in straight line, and they were all glued with PVA glue, and I easily removed the excess when needed. Luckily, even if a little bit remains, it will be almost invisible after drying. And finished! What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments if you like my work or if I should throw my tools away. I hope you had a good time and something interesting caught your eye. Summing up my work and experience from the last weeks, especially as a movie maker, I must admit that it wasn't easy. I expected to learn everything, but I didn't think it would take so much effort. Nevertheless, the beginning is behind me, I made the first step and I know that there is still a lot to do. A lot. And I'm sure you know this, but I need to say that it's highly recommended to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment and share with others. And if you are here for the first time, feel free to join the community. I post interesting photos on Instagram every day, so check what's new. Apart from the news, there are also some pics of my previous models, so it will be really nice to see you there. In the next episode I will deal with a rather interesting topic that appeared on my list quite unexpectedly. Today I will not reveal the secret, but I'm very curious what will come of it. I collected quite a lot of accessories and I have in my mind some ideas to implement on this model, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, see you next time, cheers!